I should also start, Madam Deputy Speaker, by saying that I'm partly here as a member of the Trade Committee because our chair of the Trade Committee appears to have thrown his toys out of the pram and doesn't want to come and debate the very thing that he's been asking about for the last 18 months. But of course the Trade Committee has done a huge amount of work over the 2.5 years that I've been sitting on it. We've produced reports on scrutiny, we've produced reports on the New Zealand Agreement, the Australia Agreement, on UK export finance, on inward foreign direct investment, on digital trade and data. And the very reason for these reports is because we are signing trade deals at a rapid rate of knots. Not too fast as the opposition might paint the picture, but actually in steady progress, signing deals that will be of huge benefit to the UK service economy, to our producers, to the British consumers, to the British public. And we should and ought to talk more about that. We are attempting on the Trade Committee to keep up with the government's ambitious programme to ensure that we are able to produce reports for this House. I have to say, every point that the Honourable Gentleman from Whalley said, Right Honourable Gentleman said from Whalley on scrutiny, I agree with. I do think we have to have a conversation in this chamber about scrutiny. It's not to be feared, and if anything, the expertise in this House would be a huge benefit for both members of the government and for those members of the International Trade Department to listen to. The whole point of the work that we perform on the Trade Committee has to be as a critical friend, Madam Deputy Speaker, to look at what works, to look at what doesn't work, and to try and strengthen the government's position through those reports, through those engagement sessions, and by consulting widely with experts across the United Kingdom. We all wish to see the United Kingdom to strike the most effective trade deals, although that might not be the case in relation to the SNP, who don't seem to support any trade deals at any point in any time. And in fact, I was accused of being quite having some ample dexterity in being able to say that I want to see scrutiny. But actually, the Honourable Gentleman has gone, who's now no longer sitting in his place, started his debate by saying that he was pro-free trade. I've never heard the SNP sort of give us such a line before, because it's clearly not the case. And while we're at it, when they do start on this line of saying that they want to be part of the EU, leaving the Union of the United Kingdom is the only thing that will cause an economic catastrophe for Scotland. But, as I say, Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the opportunity in this day's debate to be able to talk about the Australia and New Zealand trade deal, because so often is the case in this country we talk about the import impact rather than the export opportunities, and I believe there are many, and we must talk them up. It's no wonder when we listen to the opposition, when they highlight Australian members of Parliament and ministers saluting these trade deals, that we get the end of the stick, that they suggest that they've only got the best side of this deal. Well, if they started promoting the positive elements in this trade agreement, we might also find that people would actually have a little bit of faith in it, because scratch the surface and you will find that there are huge benefits. But if I may, I just want to start on 5 recommendations that came from one of the most recent reports of our committee. Firstly, and I asked it to the opposition shadow spokesperson about the role of CRAG. This was introduced by the Labour government at the time in 2010. We do need to have an open and frank discussion across party, across the House, about what new system we might be able to put in place. If we're not going to use it, if we're not going to use the mechanism that has been promised before, then we might as well look at some alternative measure. And if we are going to ignore having a votable motion, could we at least, and I ask the government with the greatest respect to this, could we please have general debates during the CRAG process, so at least we can talk about it while and before the deal has actually been ratified. I think that does send a positive message to all of us who return to our constituencies to talk to farmers who are concerned, to businesses who might be concerned. That at least would be a simple thing to put forward. The second is that we must also ensure that the scrutiny and the ministers are turning up on time to the Trade Committee, which we have had problems with in the past. But I have to say, as has been said already, the front bench team that we have in the Department of Trade is truly excellent. I've worked with a number of them on a number of occasions, and it is very reassuring to know that they take these points seriously, and I've had those conversations with them both in public and in private. But I'd also like to just say there is a valid point in ensuring that government departments are joined up when it comes to trade deals. That wasn't always the case, and it certainly wasn't felt so from the committee's point of view during the Australia negotiations, better though it was on the New Zealand negotiations. And the last thing is that this point about a joined-up negotiating objective that we have as a one-size-fits-all, I'm less than persuaded by. I think we have to be flexible about looking about the needs of each and every trade deal that we end up signing. Now, in relation to the Australia trade agreement, Madam Deputy Speaker, we need to look at where it benefits us. And I think the first thing, as it was said by the Minister who's no longer in his place, is that 82% of our workforce and 80% of GDP are in financial services. And this is really where this deal strikes, and strikes incredibly well and effectively. As for the first time, we will have greater access, more than ever before, in Australian markets. From architecture to law to financial services, we will be on an equal footing. And as a result of this, this could increase UK service exports to Australia by £5 billion. Additionally, it cuts the bureaucracy that so many small businesses have been frustrated about on at the same time. The second point I want to make around this deal is around mobility, which does offer the opportunity to support economic growth, recovery and the opportunities for people on both sides in Australia and in the United Kingdom. Under the new travel arrangements, which are based on reciprocity, it's worth noting that there will be a youth mobility scheme, innovation and early careers scheme, exchange pilot, there will be a working holiday maker initiative, and the whole purpose of this, again going back to what the Right Honourable Gentleman said from Worley, is that there will also be side initiatives for us to be able to look at how we can expand this. Trade deals, once signed, are not static. They evolve over time, and we must remind ourselves that what was signed recently does not necessarily have to be the trade deal that we live with for the rest of our lives. We can steadily improve them, and we must look to do so. And certainly when it comes to visa arrangement for shared professional qualifications, we should absolutely be heading in that direction. Yes, of course I will.
Honourable Gentleman for giving way. Does the Honourable Gentleman seriously think that that is in any way compensation for the loss of freedom of movement and the workers that we were getting through from Europe as a result of the disastrous Brexit deal?
Well, firstly, we have a trade and cooperation agreement, a free trade agreement with the European Union, which is important to note. We are also, which you voted against, which we also have a significant amount of opportunity to welcome people. The whole point is about control over it. The whole point on this is about having control. I think it's absolutely right that if we are going to sign new relationships with countries around the world, then we want to be able to do it through the Commonwealth, through countries that have shared ideas and views about the world, and I think we should welcome that. There was a point made by a member from Wales, whose constituency I can't remember off the top of my head, but he made this point about our inability to bid in on Australian government contracts. Well, actually, I'm afraid to say that's incorrect. Within the very terms of the Australian trade agreement, businesses in the United Kingdom will be able to bid into Australian government contracts worth up to £10 billion a year. This is the most extensive the Australians have ever agreed to in any free trade agreement in the world. And then lastly, on the point around farming, I absolutely bowed to the knowledge and experience of the former Secretary of State for DEFRA, but I was surprised that we didn't have more about the Agriculture Commission that we set up, the Trade and Agriculture Commission, and I do hope that that might be the vehicle in which we can ensure better scrutiny, better enhancements and support around farming in the future. And I do think we need to look at that, and we've certainly had extensive negotiations in the Trade Committee about how we can use that. And maybe that is, of course, yes, of course I will.
Does he agree that if you were to try to strengthen the Trade and Agriculture Commission, the right thing to do would be to move it within DEFRA and to remove it away from the Department of International Trade so that it could have access to the technical knowledge and expertise that it said was denied of it in the first assessment?
I mean, well, I'm in such dangerous territory if I give a straight answer to this, but what I might say is that it is also comprising. I'm sorry, I'm just looking to see if the whip's behind me. But actually what I might say is that there is significant expertise on the Trade and Agriculture Commission already, and it's not for me to discuss where and how it is structured in which department. But I do think this was an issue that was rightly called for by the former chairman of the EFRA committee, and is something that gave a lot of hope to a lot of members of Parliament who have rural constituencies, and we ought to use it, as I know the government takes it very seriously when it produces its reports. And lastly, Madam Deputy Speaker, just on this point, is that around on CPTPP, we talk at a great length about the flow of people, of ideas and of goods. There is huge benefits in these rather fractured and difficult times for us looking to join the Comprehensive, Progressive and Trans-Pacific Partnership. It offers us a significant opportunity to ensure that we can actually strengthen our relations in the Asia-Pacific. We can encourage the diversification of supply chains away from China and encourage greater trading between those countries that share like-minded ideas. Of course, I could go on for a lot longer about the New Zealand agreement, but I might just touch on a couple of things very briefly. Is that not many people in this debate have mentioned the very huge benefits that have been found in digital trade. If you want to see where the United Kingdom has really led the world, just look at the benchmarking of what has happened between our UK-Singapore digital trade agreement. The terms within the in the New Zealand agreement are truly, truly extensive and will make an enormous difference to countries around the world, and will perhaps make a very enormous difference to CPTPP, which may end up using these terms. So I think we also, and added to which, when we talk about the environment as well, this has been a point that has been mentioned by some people, saying that perhaps Australia has got lower standards. I don't look forward to the moment that Nicola Sturgeon goes on one of her ridiculous trade missions to Australia after the comments that the honourable gentleman on the front bench made about Australia and their standards. Because actually what you have in the New Zealand trade agreement is you have the first environmentally groundbreaking agreement in a free trade agreement anywhere in the world, and yet not a single opposition member has mentioned these points. So I just feel that we may talk... Yes, of course I will.
Is the honourable gentleman denying that, for example, the animal welfare issues, in terms of how animals are treated differently, how they're raised, how they're transported, the additions that are used in terms of pesticides and antibiotics, is he saying that's not the case?
I'm saying when the honourable gentleman compares Australia to Brazil in its standards, that is a massive insult to Australian markets and farmers. I don't think we should do that. And when we do this to other countries, we must not talk down our Australian counterparts. We must work with them. Of course I will.
You might want to withdraw that comment, because I haven't compared Australia to Brazil at any point in the debate or previously.
I'm afraid, as I heard it, the honourable gentleman used other countries as a reference and said that Australia was one of the worst. Now, I'm happy to go back through the record on Hansard and look at that, but I will certainly do so tomorrow. And it was also said, actually, is that we have now tied ourselves up in knots around having, and the honourable gentleman said this as well, which we are tying ourselves up in knots around having paper documentation to our trade deals. This is exactly the reason the government is introducing the electronic trade bill, which SMEs across this country have now welcomed. Anyway, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've taken up far too much of your time, but I think the purpose is that we must look at our trade deals in the round. We must look at them as opportunities to where we can expand. We must ensure that we talk them up, not down, and we must above all ensure that every one of the businesses in our constituencies is aware of how they can use the support from the Department of International Trade to be able to reach new markets, because businesses that go further afield are more resilient in all times, good and bad. Thank you.